but it was approximately 800 square feet. So it was a single family ranch style home, 1950s, but certainly not archetypically mid-century modern. And we did a remodel on it. My brother was born in 1984. And to prepare for him coming, my dad hired a design build contractor, and they designed an addition for it. And, you know, I came from a very working class family. My mom didn't work for the first 2 years of my life. But after that, she enjoyed a career in senior care. She was a nurse. And so we had to do a lot of the work ourselves to be able to afford the additional square footage. So at about 10 years old, I got my start in remodeling. And it was really informed by a lot of the kind of old world craftspeople. You know, it really was a lot of old school, old world immigrants who came over, dairy farming, of course. But I started in 4-H, which is, are you guys familiar with 4-H?
No.
It's an organization that is primarily agriculturally oriented. At least that was where it began. So in Wisconsin, you've got the county fairs and the state fairs. And what those fairs tend to be for is for people in agriculture and animal husbandry to come together, show off the work that they've been doing, and really kind of share their passions around their lifestyle. And the way I got involved in it was I did a woodworking class and an electricity class and model rockets, baking, and macrame. And adults in the community volunteer to teach the kids in 4-H what they know about each of those things. So I got to work with a German woodworker who at 10, 11 years old was teaching me how to turn elements for our projects on the lathe, and a lot of handwork. I think I will have muscle memory for hand sanding in my right arm for the rest of my life. And so that was really the start of it for me, was feeling the joy and the thrill that comes from making with your hands, and, you know, the precision of what can be done. My electricity teacher, Mr. Wetzel, he was very much focused on, you know, if we're talking residentially, what's inside the wall and what's inside the panel. You know, he believed that his work wasn't just how straight the outlet was, nor how well the light and the switching worked. His work was really about how cleanly has he run all of his wires. On his bends, he had me do perfect 90-degree bends. All of the circuitry wiring that I would do would have to be run perfectly parallel. And something about being in a community like that and growing up that way has absolutely carried into my professional life. And I credit those really formative young experiences for the specific successes that I've had in construction.
Interesting. So even at that young age, you were somehow naturally inclined or interested in with this level of perfection, even for things that are unseen. Because some folks, perhaps, I don't know if it's a nature versus nurture thing, some folks are not wired that way. They would be like, this is stupid. Why are we bothering to put this effort into making it clean?
Yeah, I think that it's less nurture for me and much more nature. As I've gotten older, I've learned things about myself. I've kind of self-diagnosed by observing, my stepkids and my daughter. I've self-diagnosed as being somebody who's enjoyed ADHD most of their life. And a close bedfellow of that tends to be anxiety. Now, when I was a kid, there really weren't words for those things.
Yeah.
But there certainly are now. And as I've learned what those are, I've gone, oh my goodness, that's what I've been experiencing. And rather than it being an impediment in my life, I found it to be a cornerstone of my success and how my career's gone in the direction it has, because those experiences that come from anxiety and ADHD put me in a position to need order and need clarity of space to have the best experience in a space. So it's, I was with a client in a home that I was doing for them. This was probably in 2015 or 16. And we were in a finished room, incredibly detailed. The shop drawings for the paneling in this room were marked up to the 64th of an inch. When the mill worker would try to change from 7/64 to 3/32, the architect would redline it, cross it out, and put 7/64 back in. So it was really, really clear that we were building this place to as much perfection as the human hand can do, or the human eye can see. And we were looking at a detail, and to 99%, maybe even more, of the people in the world, they would have thought that it was sublime, perfectly executed. But there was this minor imperfection, and the imperfection was in how the finish, as it was drying, had, gravity had pulled it down, and it fluffed ever so slightly, and it caused this pillowed edge at a door transom panel where there was a cork reveal. And the client's in the powder room with me, and I see him moving up and down, so the level of his eyes are changing, and he's watching the light play across this reveal. And he said, "You know what tortures me about this, Matt? And I will never forget that moment in time. Do you know what tortures me about this?" That's when I felt a real and significant connection to this client beyond what we've already experienced with each other, where I went, yeah, I not only do I know what it is that's torturing you, but I understand why it tortures you. Man, I'm so glad we found each other.
And so what happened with that slump?
What an amazing project, and what an amazing client. The client said, I made a mistake here, so I'm going to take responsibility for this. The cork reveal is 2 millimeters tall by 4 millimeters deep. My mistake was it should have been 6 millimeters deep. So we're going to take this entire room apart, and we're going to redo it with a 2 millimeter deeper cork reveal in the material. Your job, Matt, is to figure out how to produce all these panels in a way that doesn't allow this lacquer to slump. And so we completely redid it. And again, 99+% of people would have found the first installation sublime, but the second installation was markedly improved.
Wait, so when you guys were both standing in the powder room and you're moving up and down to see the light catch that panel, how much of the powder room was complete? Was it done?
It was done, except for the installation of the monolithic stone vanity. So we hadn't put the stone vanity in yet. So, nor had we installed the toilet. So we didn't have to pull those elements out. But, yeah, the LED lights and the light codes were in. Everything was functioning, floors, full deal, and it was a complete revision to the finish in that room.
That's crazy. It is, I think, well, we'll get into this later, maybe in the conversation, but I think it's one of the potentially challenging parts about being an architect or a contractor who sees those things, because you see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you feel it's not right. Mm-hmm. It's just categorically not right, even if it's off by, whatever small degree. But for most folks, let's say, if they don't perceive it as being an issue, even if they see it, then that's where it becomes frustrating. It's like, you should fix it.
I have this belief about architecture, and I've never studied architecture in school. School for me was a much different route. It was sciences and biochemistry, and also a meander, definitely not a straight line. But what I've learned as a contractor and as a carpenter is that those small distracting errors or areas that weren't considered in the greater design, when those opportunities aren't taken for the highest expression of the architecture, the user experience suffers. And one of the cornerstones of my specific approach to building is that everything that the team installs on the project, including, and I emphasize this, including and especially temporary construction, temporary stairs, temporary guardrails, whatever it may be, all of it needs to be done as if it's a permanent installation. And sometimes the carpenters will question and say, why should we take the time to ensure that our guardrails are plumb, level, square, that we've considered the fasten replacement? And, do you really want us taking the time to do all of that? And my response invariably is, yes, please. And the reason why I want you to do it is because it informs the project culture. And the more organized, the cleaner, the more precise and paid attention to your project is, you create an energy on the project that when people come into it or onto it, they recognize, I'm in a special place. And when I'm here, there's an awareness that I have to bring to my work so that I am honoring the work of the people before me and the people after me. And by doing that, it lends itself much more easily to the finished product that the client interacts with. And so it's that precision of construction and things being thought about, even in the temporary and in the rough while we're building homes, that translate into the absolute finest expressions of architecture and craft in the finished home.
It's very interesting to kind of think about the care and the craft even from that temporary construction site. I think it's a very smart way, like you said, to kind of set the mentality and the attention from the beginning and saying that everything that we're doing on site is important. I feel like, as we experience it when we go on site, it's always rushed and everybody's always behind. They were always trying to catch up on things and fix problems. But I think having that attention set up from the beginning is very important. Yeah.
I think site culture is something I want to talk to you about for sure. But I like the philosophy and the thinking behind it. And as well, I also do believe in the impact it would have on the final product. It strikes me as really being a kind of craftsman's perspective and way of living, actually, in a way, if your vocation is a passion, it's not just about getting to the end. It's about having a mentality throughout It's I'm trying to think of how I might relate to it. Like for myself, I played an instrument for a long time, and I was always part of various ensembles. And it's interesting when you're part of an ensemble because rehearsals are very serious things. You don't dick around. You don't be sloppy. You have to be actually very structured and very ordered. Even during rehearsals, even during the first rehearsal, and you're 100 rehearsals away from the final concert, you don't ever approach your craft in a way where you're being sloppy ever in a rehearsal. You just don't do it because all of that stuff, it's hard to explain maybe to people who maybe don't get it, but it adds up. It filters into the final thing, like for sure.
I totally agree with you. And, corny 80 movies reference, but it's the Karate Kid. It's, paint the fence. It's wax on, wax off. It's through endless repetition, the 10,000 hours of practice that it takes many to achieve mastery. It's through the diligence and the commitment of craft in all of the things that we do on the project. Some of the people that I've met in my career who have expressed this the best. You go to their truck and you look at how they've organized their tools inside their truck. You look at their tool bag and how they bring their tools onto a job site. Their awareness as they walk on the job site. These are very observable traits. Mm. And, coming out of, my 4-H background and really a culture of the oral tradition of apprenticeship and passed down knowledge for craft. It's that level of repetition and purest expression of craft in each of the things we do that makes us the craftspeople or the artists or the professionals that our clients are expecting when they're hiring us and empowering us to do these phenomenal projects. Mm.
There's a phrase that comes to mind, and I think I don't know if it's specific to woodworking or maybe anyone who's fabricating stuff. And I blank on is it knolling? It's this idea of when you're working in a shop and you have your tools, that every time you put down your tool when you're done using it, it has to be put down in either the correct spot or oriented a certain way. So you don't just throw your tool. I think it's knolling. I forget.
I don't know the word. I'm unfamiliar with it.
I might be getting the word wrong. But it's sort of the difference. It was basically that's what it is. When you're working, you don't just throw your stuff everywhere and be like, it's a convenient place for my hammer. You lay it down in a very specific orientation. So the next time when you pick it up, it's there. That's maybe more of a housekeeping trick, but it's important.
I mean, keeping things organized is also like in the real world, like on your desk, on your workbench, is also a way to keep your head organized, right? Like, when we start the week on Monday, like my desk has to be clean. Like I cannot start in a state of mess because it's just, I don't know. It's just, you need to get your foundations right.
Absolutely. The place where this realization came to me was, I was a carpenter. It was 2003 or 4. I was working for Ryan Associates. And I was on a project in Palo Alto that Stephen Ehrlich was the architect for prior to EYRC being formed. And on that project, I was responsible for a lot of really important finish carpentry. We had these huge slab mahogany doors, pocket doors, that would come out of their pockets and would have to be scribed to cast in place architectural concrete elements that were walls and seating. And so we'd have to coat around each and every one of those things. And I'd come in the morning and I would lay I'd clean the space, I'd lay all my tools out, and I'd go to work. And in invariably, entropy happens. And invariably, I would find myself looking for, where's my square, where's my pencil? And as soon as I caught myself kind of wasting time looking for my tools, I would stop, clean, reorganize my space, and reapproach the work. And in doing that, I learned that my work product was phenomenally better. And I was much more focused by always having a clean and organized space. Mm-hmm. And I didn't stay in carpentry long enough to really become, master level where, I was never putting my pencil in the wrong spot so that I had to stop and clean up enough. But that's really where it all came from was, there's an intentionality to each and everything that we do. And if we pay attention to it and we find the joy in what people might consider mundane, who has joy in cleaning up their workspace? Well, when the result of cleaning up your workspace is a clear headspace and excellent craft, I think all of us can find joy in the mundane.
I want to ask you about the site conditions of projects that are under construction, because quite often, not always, but probably more often than not, it's a mess, right? I mean, especially like, what do you call it? A demolition is obviously messy, but even when you're building stuff, sites can get quite messy. And it would seem like from the thing that you're describing that the sites that you manage were probably kept quite tidy.
We endeavor to keep them quite tidy and very organized. And, in order to do that, there's a cost component to it. Generally speaking, it's project laborers are responsible for material handling, moving all of the material around the site, storing it, protecting it, and cleaning up. Mm-hmm. And where our industry seems to be right now, because of the intensity of cost escalation and the issues around supply chain and supply demand in construction, is we're all looking for ways to make construction less expensive. Yeah. And what I'm seeing is that we're cutting some of the site labor, which is, in my opinion, not a really good idea, because it's in maintaining the cleanliness of these sites and the organization and, the safety, where we empower the people who are on site installing the work to do their best work. So there are strategies to increase the organization and cleanliness of a job site without having to provide labor that's only there for the cleanup. Mm-hmm. And that comes down, once again, to your job site culture and ensuring that as you are in, it starts in pre-construction, and ensuring that the subcontractors and vendors that you're inviting to participate in your project are aware that there is the responsibility of participating in the organization, cleanup, and safety of the job site on a daily basis. And when that level of leadership and support is present on a job site, even in times where we're trying to do more work with less labor, we can still provide for that level of job site experience through cleanliness, through organization, through really prioritizing safety.
Yeah, safety is obviously a primary factor. I think I sometimes wonder whether or not clients who don't have any background in architecture or being a contractor or have a background in making stuff if they understand some of the kind of principles that you're describing, because it would seem, I'm trying to think from the outside perspective, that sometimes it's like, well, having people to run around and clean up the site, being tidy with the temporary stairs you're making, that's just superfluous stuff. I don't want to pay for that. It's not necessary. Just give me the end thing that looks good,
That does happen. And I have a belief that each of us in our industry, you and Marina as architects, me as a general contractor, we all have a responsibility to be advocates for the project. And, there's a career path known as owner's representation. And that career path exists to really address what I think is at the core of your question, which is your clients, by and large, are not design and construction professionals. Yet they are the ones commissioning and bearing financial responsibility for these projects. So how do we, as their team, as a group of project stakeholders, help them to make the best decisions for their project? Well, the way that we do it, and this goes for the owner's representatives as well, is to really commit ourselves to be project advocates. And what that means is not being, and this may be a little extreme, but not being sycophantic with our clients, not being afraid of giving them information that they may not enjoy having that information. Rather, it's to move forward with vulnerability and integrity and share with your clients the outcomes, the likely outcomes of certain decisions that they're looking to make. And if a client doesn't want to spend, the annual salary for an additional labor on their project, you're not going to be able to make them spend that money. But it's still incumbent upon all of us to let the client know why we're carrying that cost, what we, through our experience, believe that's going to deliver for their project. And, in the sense of, we don't want to spend money on the things that we don't see. We don't want to spend money on, incessant cleanup. We just want the finished product to look great. Part of getting that finished product to look great is by cleaning up every day. And it is by developing that job site culture where people are committed to, perhaps even obsessed with, the organization of the space.
Yeah, I think this, to me, gets to a very fundamental point, which is that these projects are very process driven. If you're talking about a house, the houses that you've worked on are at a very, very high tier, but even say a mid to upper range house that takes a couple years to build, 2 years, I'd say, or even 18 months, that's a long time. And there's a lot of moving components in those 18 months or 2 years, a lot of different people coming in and out of the site doing different things. So the idea that you have to have, you have to be organized and things have to be in place. There has to be a structure. There has to be a methodology to it. If you just think about the amount of time it takes to do a project, it makes sense. Like you can't have it be, you can, but it doesn't work out. You can't have it be any other way for that long and then expect the final product to be of whatever quality that, most owners and clients anticipate on receiving.
I agree 100%, without a doubt. Without a doubt. On your project, have you guys observed outcomes, different outcomes from projects you've been on where the CA component of your jobs were truly delightful in that the site was very organized, versus a little bit challenging where the site was less organized? What's your experience as an architect?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I have to say from our experience at the moment, it mostly had to do with the scale of projects. We worked on projects that were towers, and when you work on big scale project, any small mistake has repercussion all over the place, right? So there has to be a very specific process and everyone to be extremely diligent because everybody is at risk if someone messes up, I feel like.
Well, that's part of it too, the liability.
Well, the liability. So that's I think that's the thing that stuck out for me the most on doing CF or those types of projects is the rigor and the team effort put into it, because at the end, we're all in this together. If we succeed, it's thanks to all of us. And if we fail, it's because we as a group did not succeed, let's say on a single family home, I feel like depending on the level of the home, right, it's a little bit more casual. It's
generally,
it's a little bit less, oftentimes, unfortunately, of a team effort. And much more everybody's trying to maybe protect themselves a little bit differently. So yeah, the rigor might not necessarily be there, or the team spirit might not necessarily be there.
I would second that, especially we're speaking generally for single family houses and remodels, because and you know this for sure, but I think owners and clients don't quite grasp the impressive spectrum and range of expertise from really high-end folks that are very good to extremely low-end folks that exist in single-family construction. I mean, it is a massive spectrum. And because of that, there's a lot of basically poor contractors and poor builders and poor architects. And it shifts kind of the scale of things. And so you do find generally a lot less rigor in this type of space.
There's something, Marina, that you said that if you're willing, I'd love to go into a bit more and understand. If I heard you right, I believe what you had said was that on residential projects, the alignment of the team may be less precise than on your other projects, and that a part of it is because everybody is trying to manage their own risk. So first, did I say that back to you properly? And then second, I'd love to understand a bit more about what those mechanisms are. Do you think it's really just risk that is creating the kind of missing synergy of the team, or is there a missing component of onboarding team members in residential construction that is in part or in whole responsible for the challenges of having a team aligned on a collective mission?
Yeah. Well, I think, there is some sort of risk management. I mean, if you look at someone like a client building a home, I feel like a lot of the team members often are, it's their own business. When you work on skyscraper, you work for a big company and you're one of the team members joining that team, right? When you work at smaller scale project, it could get much more, not personal, but more direct to you. Like you're the business owner, you're the GC, that's your name on your truck, and you're the guy doing the work, and you're the architect, and that's your office doing the work. That's you behind the screen. So I think there is a little bit of that, but I think maybe mostly, like you were alluding to, it's more of the alignment, right? And, we see too often clients hiring architects or contractor or both without thinking, okay, how is this pair going to work together on my project, right? Like they happen to know a guy who knew a guy who said they should hire this person, and then they did the same thing for the other person, and then it's like a date. Like it might not work out. You have to establish some sort of common interest, compatibility, and alignment in the things that you do. So I think oftentimes those types of processes for single family homes tend not to be as successful because of that reason.
Great answer. Do you have a prescription to solve that? What could we be doing in our, residential relationships that could, create greater alignment in a broad team of stakeholders?
Well, I think from the client's point of view, if they're the one trying to find the professionals that they need, is they should really do their homework. Referrals from friends are great, but it's not because this person did a great job on your friend's house that they're going to be the right one for your house, right?
Well, who's qualifying great job? That's the question.
Who's qualifying great job, and is there an alignment in what they do and what you want? I think you have to do a little bit of homework, and then if you do hire one of these professionals first, let's say a contractor first or an architect first, maybe ask these people for recommendation of people that they think would be a best alignment to fill that other position. I feel like you really know how people are, like how good a contractor is or how good an architect is after you work with them on a job, right? Their design skills or their building skill is one thing, but like you said, like the process is as important as the final product. And I think knowing how people work is probably like a pretty important thing, and maybe a safe thing.
That gets to something that Marina's always saying, which is you should, if you're an owner or a client, you should ask your architects or your potential architect if you're interviewing, and ask your potential contractors, what is their process? Like, what do they do to ensure a successful project? And I think a lot of folks, I get it, people are really busy. They don't have time to get into the weeds of stuff. They just want to hire somebody and go and get it done. But I think that's a really good question, because anybody who is very passionate about their job and working on long-term projects like yourself, you have thoughts about it. You spend time thinking about, like, this is what I do to make sure it turns out right, and this is what I'm going to do better next time. And if the person you're interviewing doesn't have a fairly clear and organized answer, or they don't have an organized process, that to me is like one way to filter from a person who doesn't know anything about it. It's hard.
Well, and we see oftentimes clients too who, let's say, hire a design build company, and then, kind of like halfway through the design, they're not quite happy. So then they go hire another designer, and they actually didn't know really what that design build company was going to provide them with. It's kind of like you hire someone, you are thinking that you hire them for something, but you didn't even bother asking them, what are you going to give me if I hire you, right? So that's also, I think, a fundamental question.
That's a really good point. Do you guys think that there's anything that we can be doing, the project stakeholders, on the client's behalf? Is there something missing in our residential approach between architects, engineers, interiors, and contractors that we could be doing to create that alignment without having to burden our clients with kind of leading that?
That's a good question. What happened here? I thought we were asking you the questions.
I asked your permission.
Well done.
No, I'm joking.
I wanted to know what you think.
I'm actually quite curious to hear your answer to your own question. I don't know. It's a really good one. That's one I haven't thought about specifically. I mean, I do think that there needs to be much more, not cross-pollination, but much more conversation between the three different fields that you mentioned in general, period. I think when we cease having those relationships and conversations, that's where we get into trouble. Like, even from one of the three team members' perspective, right? And we know it's a team process and a team project. I want to know, like, from the contractor, tell me what I can do better to help your job. Like, what is it? One of my favorite questions to contractors is like, name a few things that architects do that you hate, that we could actively change, not just pet peeves, that we wear all black or something, but what can we do to make your life better, to make the project better? I mean, I could wear more color too. But... Wear
black on construction sites, so such a good idea.
Yeah. I think that's a part of it. And I'd also say that there are, it's all a game about finding the people you resonate with and finding people you have common beliefs with. Like you and us, we're in a similar kind of wavelength. That's partially why we vibe and everything, and we tend to agree on a lot of things. But there are a lot of architects or contractors who don't have the same, call it, belief system, and they're more of like, we'll just bang it out, it's good enough, and move on to the next one. And there is quite possibly a need or a space for that where it's appropriate for people who don't have certain amounts of money or whatnot. But I think for the type of projects we're talking about, it's just finding the right people and becoming advocates for each other.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Advocates for each other, without a doubt. And, you know, what that says to me is that professionally, we have to develop empathy for our other project stakeholders. And I really think that, you know, you said you're interested in my answer to that same question. I mean, my goodness, I spend so much time thinking about this. And it's one of the major questions that's driving the next phase of my career, actually, is how do we create greater alignment in our project teams to the benefit of the projects and the people spending their lives delivering these projects? And, you know, being that we're Bay Area people, we're very familiar with startup culture. And I view each new project as a startup. So, you know, let's just use really, really simple math. Let's say we've got a project that is going to run for 3 years, 1 year in pre-construction, 2 years in construction. And let's say that the all-in cost for the client, not including the purchase price of the property, but their construction soft costs and hard costs, let's say that it's going to be a $30 million project. Well, what we've done is, as we're putting this team of stakeholders together, we are forming a startup company with $10 million of revenue projected for its first 3 years of business. Now, you're not looking at keeping that business going because very few clients want a consistent $10 million a year burn rate in perpetuity. But when you look at the project that way and you go, okay, this is a $10 million a year business. And what does that mean? Are our systems that we're going to be operating in that are to a degree defined contractually, but aren't defined completely specifically? They're kind of left to everybody's interpretation of how they've done it before, what they've experienced before, what they like. We don't elucidate the unknowns incredibly well. We spend a ton of time in contract negotiations, and what everybody loves to say about contracts is, let's get this thing done. Let's make sure that it's comprehensive, and then let's put it in a drawer and hope we never need it. To me, that is kind of sad, because the expense and the time put into negotiating a document that we hope to never need and never use is a lost opportunity to define the culture of our startup. And so one of the things, and there's a lot of things that I want to see in our industry, we are at such an exciting time in design and construction right now. The opportunity out there absolutely blows me away. And one of the opportunities that I see is this opportunity to focus on building these project teams, elucidating the agreements of how we're going to work with each other. And, your question that you enjoy asking contractors, what are some things architects do that drive you absolutely nuts? I mean, that can be the type of conversation that you have where people can say, well, one thing that drives me nuts is that it seems like on every project, the design team feels like we have a, blind contingency somewhere that we can draw from to pay for changes that weren't part of the scope that we priced. Oh, okay. So are you saying you don't have a blind contingency? Yeah, we definitely don't. Everything is really transparent. So let's have a conversation around how we're going to, architect, how are you going to deliver design? Are you going to do all of the commitments, the architectural commitments to geometries and details up front and give us that elusive 100% CD set that we're all looking for so that we can price it, put a schedule together and not vary from that path? Or are you the type of architect that is going to design the entire time? And look, it's not right and it's not wrong, but we've got to understand who each other are and how we support each other in delivering the best expressions of our work. And that isn't always easily constrained to AIA contract templates. Mm-hmm. So what we've got to be able to do with each other is we've got to have self-knowledge. How do we work the best? How do we interact with the team so that we can deliver our best product? And our team members have to do the same with each other. And then we've got to be able to have these conversations about how we'll do it as project advocates. And we have to be able to kind of step away from having so many of our decisions be based on risk and fear, and rather have our decisions be based in trust in the agreements of the team and a commitment to supporting the highest expression of architecture, design, and craft that's possible.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I think it's about, if you have a team of people, the three, let's say, the two big ones are the architect and the contractor, but let's put the engineer there as well, and that extends to everyone else on the team, all the other consultants. But if everyone is aligned in terms of the objective and the goal of the project, then that's a huge thing. So what I'm saying more specifically is, let's say you have a contractor and an architect, and the architect is interested in doing a really, really high-end build of whatever it is, right? The contractor is like, yeah, I can do that. But really, they're kind of more interested in something, let's say, mid-range, which is fine. But that's where they're aiming toward. And therefore, in their mind, they're like, okay, well, we don't really need a full set of CDs. We can just build off of like this preliminary set. We don't really need CA to happen. And there's a lot of things that get trimmed out of the process with that kind of mindset. And so I think that if you have the two people and they are aligned, then you can have this synergy and this conversation, an in-depth conversation, sometimes over lunch, and saying like, okay, what do you expect to happen on this project? As you said, I love your point of talking to the architect and saying like, your CDs, okay, you're going to produce construction documents, but what does that actually mean to you, right? Then you can have those conversations and they can be productive. But if there's a misalignment, that's where it becomes problematic, and everyone needs to get on the same page on day one almost. Otherwise, it's going to be friction and it's going to be pointless.
It comes down to communication and honesty too, right? I mean, there's no benefit in hiding each of our process to each other, or holding how we're thinking we're going to approach this or that. I think just putting all the cards on the table and seeing what the cards are and what we can do with it is definitely the best way to go about it.
I completely agree. It's that vulnerability of process, right? It's, hey, here's what we've found to be successful, and getting in and having the conversation around what's going to work for the entire project team. And, that is absolutely just a brilliant approach to creating the best work, which, as you can probably tell, what really drives me in this industry is being able to deliver the absolute finest project.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of assumptions that professionals make about the other professionals, because a lot of times you're working with new people, which can be great, it can be bad, but in either case it's new. And if you don't have the mentality that you and Marina were describing of like, what did you say, put our cards on the table, let's have a conversation, let's figure out what's going to happen here. If you don't have that approach, what happens is you sit at your desk, you say, well, what's this? I'm going to assume that this is the contractor is going to do this, or let's just see what happens, And it's interesting to hear that you guys are trying to, or maybe you have, more specifically or specified greater detail what these different phases and checkpoints mean. Because I think that if you were to take a poll of 100 architecture offices about what does 50% DD mean for each of them, I think most of them would say it varies from project to project. I'm almost 100% sure that would be their answer. Like, I don't know, it depends on the project, depends on the contract, depends on everything else. Like it varies greatly, which, now that I say it, I don't really know what that means. I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing. I can't imagine that's necessarily a good thing.
Well, there is not really any actual standards. And also it comes because of the fact that design is an iterative process. It's not a step-by-step thing. We do step 1, step 2, and we're going to get successfully to step 3. No, we don't know how we're going to get to step 3 sometimes, right? So
in terms of design,
right? So it's kind of hard to have a standard, I think, also because everybody's creative process could be different. But at least at the beginning of a project, because we're working as teams, agree on some sort of structure that everybody would comply to or agree on, just so again, like everybody's on the same page, I think makes a lot of sense.
The other trick that I like to use on projects I've done is creating an on-site workspace for other project stakeholders. Architects, please work from the job site with us. On a project a handful of years ago when I was a superintendent, it was in Pacific Heights, and it was on the north side of one of the east-west running streets. So, heavy hills. And we got a permit and built a temporary work platform in the backyard to level out a, incredibly steep rear yard. And what we were able to do with that is we were able to build an office building, small, right? It was more of a plywood shack, and 2 restrooms, that had running water. And by building that space, we had 3 workstations in that office. And in one of the workstations, we had an employee of ours, the general contractor, who was the design assist. So he was the architectural coordinator, working with the architects to go through means and methods, constructability, provide verifying field information to really drive. This was the same project that was, shop drawings were in 64. And then we had 2 workstations where 2 of the project architects were on site with us pretty much through the entire, this was a 44-month project, through the entire project. And by creating that workspace where you can invite your design team in, have a dedicated space for them where they, can have pictures of their dog or their kids and plug in, and it makes it, hey, this is our project site. This is not the general contractor's project site. Please come in, please work with us, and let's really build the relationship and help us understand what you're looking for so that we can help you get there. And I think that's a really important component. There's this really positive tension between design and construction. And what I mean by that is you guys have to trust that we are in service to your intent, and that we as contractors and builders not only understand what you're looking to do, but are committed to doing it as absolutely best as we can. And what we have to believe as contractors is that the design that you're putting forward is going to work. I'll give an example of what I mean. So on this project, this same one, the 64th project, the architect and I had really gotten to know each other at this point, and we were going to have to install an applied baseboard in a utility closet. There were 2 basement levels on this home, and this was in the first basement level. And I had to get this baseboard in really early because there were 42 conduits that were going to be coming up that were distributing power between the electrical room and everything else in the building. And I knew the architect was going to want the absolute slimmest baseboard possible. So what I did was I gave her the exact limit that I knew I couldn't go any less than and commit to the structural integrity of the baseboard. And, we had a bit of a tug of war match over it. And eventually what I wound up doing, and, it's sitting, I don't know how many years now, 8 years on the other side of this, it seems like such a silly push and pull. But I just installed what I knew that I couldn't responsibly go less than, and she wanted 1/64th less. And this architect and I, by the way, are really good friends at this point. I mean, I've got so much love and respect for her. But it's in those moments, right, where the architect has to be able to trust the contractor. Hey, I'm not doing a, cover your ass kind of moment here. I am giving you the slimmest profile that I can responsibly give you because I do understand your intent. And, and I've got to be able to trust that architect to say, okay, slimming this baseboard down, to the point where I'm starting to be uncomfortable. There is a really important design reason for this. And just because I don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not a relevant thing to work on their behalf. And it's that tension. It's that tension of architects and designers, wanting to try the thing that's new. And, and I want to invite you guys to give some experiences, because I'm sure that there are some stories from your project coming up for you. But, what have those things been where, you've wanted a specific thing and a contractor will say, well, that's not how we do it. This is the way we've always done it. This is what I can do for you, rather than going, wow, I've never done that way before. Let's talk about it a bit. Have you guys done it that way before? But there's a way to support novel design concepts. And, you said that, Marina, I believe it was you who said it, that design is an iterative process. In these homes, so too is construction an iterative process.
Yeah.
We are prototyping things that haven't been done before sometimes, or maybe have been done, but not with these people and these materials in this way. And by taking those bold moves of iterative installation and prototypical installation, we've got to trust in the group of stakeholders. We've got to trust that the architect's leading us in a direction that will ultimately be successful. We've got to trust that the client has the financial and schedule tolerance for, the iterations that may be required to have a prototypical assembly land on, maybe V7 that is the one that actually works and that stays in the finished home. But what have your experiences around that been?
Well, I think to comment on what you said, the phrase positive tension is what you said. Was that it? Yeah, I think that's a wonderful phrase because there is tension, but but it is also can be and should be productive. I think the phrase you said of, when we ask a contractor we specified a design, the contractor says, well, we just don't do it that way. I was laughing because that's precisely the words that a lot of architects, hear at some point, and it makes them shiver because it's like, come on, man, like you got to at least try and work with me here. Like at least, have the door cracked open to possibility. But I think it goes back to the alignment that we were talking about earlier, and even extending to the client, like you said, if everyone is on board with the direction, with the goal we're trying to achieve, and the client has the patience and the money for it, then let's get there. But yeah, that is a specific common phrase. The precise one of, well, that's not how we do it, is the thing. I'm like, how many times have I heard that? I'm like, yeah, I know it's not how you've done it before, but that's not what we're doing here.
Especially when you're doing custom homes. If you are doing tract homes, I'll be like, okay, fine. Like, or spec homes, I'll be like, okay, fine. You have your way to do it. That's your business model, basically. But if you're dealing with custom homes, we all understand that we're going to have to reinvent things or rethink about certain things along the way. That's part of the deal, right? Yeah.
But I also like the thing you said of, I forget how you phrased it, but from the contractor's perspective, as the example, just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's not of value or something to that degree. I think you were talking about the baseboard being as slim as it was. And I think it goes both ways, right? There's a limit. There's a good reason why, as an architect, I want to work with a contractor who I trust. So when we get to that point of the baseboard or whatever it might be, I can say, okay, I get it. Like I trust that this person has the project's interest in mind and my interest in mind. And they're saying like, look, we're trying our best, but this is the limit here. Please, let's go this route. And it gets back to trust. But I think trust can be built obviously through having done projects together in the past, but also just frankly, just conversations and having an open mind. As I said before, if I talk to a contractor about this thing I'm designing, they say, nope, not going to do it, never done it that way. Well, I don't trust that person, right? Yeah. If they tell me, yeah, I'm really not sure about this. Here's these reasons, X, Y, and Z. I don't think we should do it. I'm still going to push, but my level of trust in them is 100 times higher, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really intimate thing that we do together. And, it's funny because as I'm saying it, I'm recognizing that I'm leaving the client out of what I'm thinking about right now. But between the design team and the contractor, that intimacy, I mean, the trust absolutely has to be there. I am not a designer. I do not have those skills. And I can design intersections and assemblies, and, I can really focus on the means and methods and constructability side of things. But when it comes to the creative process of taking a lot and designing a home for it, that's going to provide whatever experience the client's looking for, I'm not the person for that. And so what I'm here to do is to support the people who do that kind of work by helping to get a team aligned around those priorities who are going to be able to buy into it and support it and deliver a physical manifestation of the kind of theoretical, I always talk about design as being theoretical, and it is through the craftspeople that the theoretical design becomes a physical manifestation. And, from your perspective, I would assume that there's a really wild experience where you're walking through the finished space and you're seeing what your builder and team of people interpreted your intent to be and what you were looking for, and you looking at it and saying, wow, this is exactly what I pictured, or wow, this is even greater than what I had expected when we designed this, or man, I hope on the next one we're actually able to get this thing to look like what we tried to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting experience just subjectively to go through, because it's one of those three categories you mentioned. It's either dead on, which is maybe even the most impressive of the three sometimes, or if it's better, then that's just it's like getting a cherry on top. It's great, but when it's not as good, you're like, next time we'll get it, because even, and now this is just talking about design and architecture, but even with all the, 3D computer models that we have, the VR sets, the physical models, being on site and pointing and stuff like that, there's no replicating once it's done, right? So there's always going to be a little bit of gap, which I personally find to be, it's frightening, but also therefore invigorating and exciting. It's actually kind of one of the highs, like a buzz, of doing this kind of work, is that little bit of gap of not knowing exactly what it's going to be like. And in a broader sense, also the gap between, let's say, schematic more and then when it gets built, like things have to evolve and change because of constructability issues or other, more functionality, performance issues, right?
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, for us as builders, there's a bit of that experience too, in that, we're brought in at the SD phase and we're looking at renderings and floor plans and we're visualizing the space. And, 2-3 years later, we're standing in what was actually built. And, how often does that original impression of what it would be really match up to what you're standing in at completion? And in my experience, I've never had the experience of 3 years after first being introduced to a project going, yep, this is exactly what I thought it was going to look like. It's always, and that's, I think that's part of what's so fun about what we do, is that, it is always a surprise when you get to the end. And because of the amount of hours and the amount of just the amount of commitment, the amount of your life that you put into these projects, I have an emotional connection to every single project that I've been involved in, every single project. And some of the homes, because of the amount of time I've spent on them, I drive past them and I miss them. I miss them. I miss the clients, I miss the teams, but I also miss the spaces. I miss the tapestry of the experiences that I had with people during those build processes. And I miss I miss what those times and those projects have meant to me. And, at Dow Built, we just finished a project in Pacific Heights that I had been on as a carpenter when it was a Ryan Associates project 20 plus years earlier.
Wow.
And that was really interesting for me because when I was working on it with Ryan Associates, I was a carpenter. It was a really beautiful home. Holly Hallberg Design was the interior designer for it. One of my favorite places, and another carpenter, a guy named Matt Hosmer, and I were there to install a George Nakashima credenza on, I think it was the second floor hallway. And we were talking to the client about, just two Finnish carpenters oohing and awing over this Nakashima piece. And she said, well, is this a special piece? And we just went, oh my goodness, and gave her the story of Nakashima. And when I came back to it with Dow Built, 20 some years later, the superintendent for the project, John Novogradic, who is now our general superintendent for the Northern California region at Dow Built, brought him into it. And it was just, you could see the intimacy and the familiarity of the superintendent who had built the last iteration of the place, looking at this one wall that was so hard for him to get perfect. It was the east wall. It's along a staircase, so you visually interact with a vertical plane that runs 3 stories. And there's a skylight at the top of it. So it is the least forgiving light coming down a level 5 sheetrock wall that you can imagine. And you could just see him, kind of reacting to, oh no, I've got to deal with this wall again.
It's like a nightmare. He wakes up, he's back in the same position. That's too funny.
Oh yeah. Well, tangent light and, surfaces that are, supposed to be perfect. That's a tough game.
Yeah, that's not a job I envy.
We've
That's
definitely
really, really difficult.
Seen some of these wars before.
And it's a tough thing because it doesn't take much at all for people to see the flaw, and it's very easy for people to see the flaw. But the amount of work it takes to make it
to get perfect,
flawless or very close to it is just, it's really intensive. I want to ask you about kind of site culture, or when you were a site super project manager on site. You had mentioned a few things that maybe you would do that are either unique or specific, or things that were somewhat consistent, such as maintaining a clean site and ordered site. I was just wondering, are there other things that defines your type of project, if you were to run it, that you would make sure to take place more or less in every project?
Absolutely. And I've developed a very specific system for managing projects, both on the office side and on the field side, because they all support one another. And my belief is that all of the processes have to interact with each other like cogs and gears. If you've got a process that doesn't touch another process, it doesn't belong in your system. And so there is a very intentional approach to delivering these projects that I've worked to develop over the span of my career. And it's funny because everything matters. The way I approach scheduling is that there are 4 tiers in a scheduling hierarchy. There's your master schedule, which everywhere that I've been in construction, we've always used MS Project for. And, what is a project? A project is a sequential and sometimes concurrent collection of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tasks that have to be performed to go from day one on your project to turning the project over and handing the client a set fees for it. And because there are so many bits and pieces of it, you cannot put them all in your master schedule, or when something relatively inert comes up, like, hey, we're having a hard time right now deciding if we want to go with slab stone or stone tile on these walls. Can we modify the sequence a little bit so we have a little bit more time to make that decision? When those things happen, if you schedule too robustly, you've created an inability to modify. So our processes on these projects have to be more manipulatable. And so what we do is we create a framework in our project schedule. Then still in MS Project, I like to use breakout schedules. What breakout schedules do, one area that I use them is for fenestrations, long lead items. Okay, what are all of these steps that go into getting the windows designed, shop drawn, approved, procured, fabricated, shipped, delivered, and installed? And what we'll do is we'll break out those components so that we've elucidated every single step. In certain breakout schedules, it will include dry times or 2 weeks of acclimating your hardwood floor, but it's a really high detailed component. And that way you're able to really understand what kind of duration you have to have in your master schedule. The third component of it is your short interval schedule or your 3-week schedule. But this is your specific, generally a 3-week breakdown of everything that needs to be happening, both on site and behind the scenes to keep the information moving on site. So it might include RFI responses, submittal responses, items like that, but it's definitely going to include every bit and piece of what the general contractor and subcontractors are going to be doing on site. Now, that specific document is where a broader communication chain comes through. And what I like to do is on Mondays, every Monday at 12:30 p.m., our projects have a safety meeting. In the safety meeting, we go through what's happening on the job site, what are the risks, any safety concerns people have that we need to address. At the end of that meeting, we talk about what's happening on site for the remainder of the week. And invariably, conflicts will come up between sub A and sub B, either needing to be in the same space at the same time, or someone will be working overhead, somebody else wanted to move material through. And it's an opportunity for you to really resolve some of those challenges so that your 3-week schedule and your daily plans are going to come to fruition. And then the last place that happens, and all these schedules relate to each other, so the dates all track back so that they are communicating along the same schedule timeline, just with different level of detail. But every general contractor superintendent maintains a daily job log. And there's a set of patterned information that is in that daily job log. But some of the most important information from my perspective is work completed today and work to be addressed tomorrow. we want you filling out your work to be completed tomorrow at the end of your day, the day before. You know, you should know exactly what your team needs to accomplish today and where they need to be to, so that you can check in with them, 3-4 times a day. Hey, is everything on track? Are you going to, you're 75% through your scheduled time, but you're really looking like you're about 50% done with work. Let's talk a little bit about how we're going to get, 50% of the work done with only 25% remaining time. And that level of scheduling and letting your schedule infuse things like your safety meetings and, how you're greeting your tradespeople as they come in the morning, and giving you kind of a standard basis for your daily check-ins and conversations as a super as you move through the site. By incorporating something like your schedule into so many different areas, you ensure the overall success. You're training your job site culture so that everybody's recognizing the importance of performance along a schedule and everybody getting their work complete and done. And there are myriad examples of things like that in the system that I employ on the project.
It's so much information. It's great. You should write a book.
It's so funny. I've been going back into my construction library, reading some of the earlier books on construction, and one that I absolutely love is by the Taunton Press. A guy named David Gerstle wrote a book called How to Run a Successful Construction Company. And David Gerstle is possibly retired at this point. He was a Berkeley builder. I got his book, 15, maybe 20 years ago. And what I love about it is it talks about construction at its basic level, right? What is it that we're doing and what does it take to be a general contractor? And I love going back into it and stripping away everything that I've learned and experienced over a 20 plus year career, where because of what we do, there is some serious complexity to being a general contractor at this level. However, the fundamentals are not that complex. So by coming back to those fundamentals and looking at the complexity of process, which is something I've been spending a lot of time on lately, I'm getting a really clear vision for how to engage in, the next part of my career to be able to achieve more for the projects that I'm involved with, and really empower the project stakeholders. So there may be a book coming, you guys.
Sounds great.
I'm doing a lot of research and a lot of writing right now.
You have to let us know when it comes out.
Yeah, for sure. The one question I had, which is maybe talking more directly to clients and owners, is that if they have a project, they're trying to find a contractor, and there's many different ways to categorize contractors in the residential space, but I think one of them is by the size of their operation. So let's say you have a contractor who it's a single person owned and operated, and they have a very, very small crew. You have a medium-sized crew contractor, and then you have places or companies quite large, obviously. Like, what are some of the differences between working with a contractor who is one of those three types or scales?
Wow. Let me think about that for a second. What are the differences in the contractors?
I would have asked actually if you think that the same structure and rigor that you're doing on the project that you guys work on could somehow be applied to these three tiers of types of contractors that exist, or if you think that could only apply to the tier that you're in.
Okay. I like that. That actually makes it a little easier.
Fair.
You're welcome.
So, what I'm talking about at its core is a commitment to clarity and a commitment to engaged listening. And that applies to every contractor at every level, and every project at every level. Those are the cornerstones of team building, and those are the cornerstones of creating success on your project. And I think different clients may appreciate different levels of contractor. And I think one way to answer this is to kind of share some examples. So in the last couple of years, I've observed what I've kind of been calling a new class of clients. And these are clients who are building multiple projects, sometimes in multiple regions, multiple states, and are building them concurrently. The opposite side are the really small, but really high-end general contractors who might only do 1 or 2 or 3 projects at any given time, and who, have really, really defined their brand in a way that, when you're hiring them, you're not just hiring FAME architects and you're getting a FAME architects project, but you're getting a FAME architects and contractor X project. And, in those environments, it's equally important to develop the depth of that relationship, work all those systems, and have that capacity for delivery. I think what really sets it all apart is, the client and the client needs. Not every contractor is the right fit for every client, and not every contractor is the right fit for every project. There's so much that I'd love to be able to teach clients about working with contractors. And, how do you as a client, optimize for the best contractor experience? What are the bits of conflict baked into the design and construction process that are unnecessary and hold back a team from being able to deliver their absolute best work? There are just so many bits and pieces of imprecision built into our team building that, that obsession with clarity, I think, can really help us to solve.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I totally agree. And this is one of the fastest recordings we've ever done. But we have a few other last questions.
I have one. I was wondering, what's the most challenging project that you've ever built?
Can you define challenging?
Well, I guess it could mean anything, really.
It could be in terms of, I don't know, the design, was really something that you guys have never done like that before, or the site, I don't know, you built a house on the face of a cliff, or, something that was just
budget constraints, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2. One is a project that I've referenced a number of times, and it's an experience that I will carry with me so closely for the rest of my life. I mean, to a degree, it ruined me as a builder. I will always be looking for another project with a client who is that involved, that vulnerable and open to share with me things like, Matt, you know what tortures me about this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the relationship that I was able to develop with that client allowed me to really see into what they needed from the build and allowed me to give myself fully to their needs and to their project. And, you know, that project was, it was a 44-month project. I mean, that's 4 years of my life that I put into, you know, one home. And, you know, we put so much into that I think I told you guys this when we met for lunch, but on the north side of the house, we had 5 stories of scaffold. And my plumber, Ryan Loria Plumbing, he brought out a little pony keg propane tank and on-demand hot water heater, and we put a shower on the scaffold. And the reason we had a shower there was because he and I spent so many nights where we'd sleep on the project site, because to be able to put the mechanical room together the way he did, he needed everybody out of the house. He needed to be able to have pure focus, and he needed to be able to be in this creative space. You know, this wasn't a ArchiCAD designed 3D plumbing model. This was a in the brain and in the experience of this phenomenal plumber. He was going to put something together that ultimately the client stands in that room and is in love with the geometry for the plumbing in that room. And, you know, there were so many times and so many reasons why we lived on and slept on that job site. And the rewards for it, you know, the reward came in a lot of different ways, but most significantly, there was one day we were getting ready to move the clients in. And we had done we created a light well in a courtyard to bring some much needed daylight down into what otherwise would have been on the south side subterranean, on the north side, you know, bay views. But we needed to bring some more light down in there. And this thing had, you know, beautiful brick light well, painted brick, and it had this wonderful wrought iron grill that went over it to keep anyone in the courtyard from falling into it. And you know the energy of moving somebody into the space. It's, you know, everybody's moving 1,000 miles an hour. As a superintendent, you're paying really close attention, going, oh my God, I've been building this for 42 months. There are 100 people here. Nobody can damage anything. Don't touch the wall. You know, don't do this, don't do that. And in all of that frenetic energy, I turned and I saw the shadows cast by this grate over the light well onto the brick through these windows we installed. And it dropped me to my knees. And I sat down on Schotten Hansen beautiful oak floor. And in all honesty, I wept, because it was the culmination of so much energy, you know, so like trying to get a team of people who are going, Matt, why does the architect keep crossing out 332s and writing 764s? We can't do 764s. Yes, you can, you guys. Come on, stay with me here. Stay with me. We can do 764s. And even the brickmason, Salo Choa from Quarry House, at the end of that project, he said to me, Matt, I've been a mason for 30 years, and you taught me something new on this project. You taught me that I can install bricks at a 32nd of an inch. And all those experiences and seeing this sublime moment of the architecture interacting with the sun and seeing all of it come together and creating this perfect experience, I couldn't do anything but just sit there, observe it, and be awash in emotion from the perfection of that moment. So that is that is definitely my number one most challenging project, just because of the endurance required and the level of perfection. But there have been other projects that have been challenging for other reasons. For a different company I was with, I did 2 homes that we had 18 weeks to get each home designed and remodeled.
Whoa.
And they were small. They were about 3,000 square feet, little jewel boxes. But in 18 weeks, we did demo. We jacked them up off the foundations, leveled out the mud sills, ran 100% new mechanical, electrical plumbing, new custom doors and windows in teak. And I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing that you would be able to do these things in as short of a duration as we did them in. That's another, I've slept in a lot of job sites in my career, but that's another one where, I've spent a lot of time on those projects. But, in the end, that one was, I think the best way to describe it is I was there with my team at 10:30 p.m. The night before we were turning it over to be furnished. And we'd gotten everything out of the house and everybody was exhausted and really just hoping to get in their cars. And I got the lighting in the space all set up. And I asked everybody to stop, and it was a team of 6 people, and I asked them to come into the building. And in the glow of, perfectly designed and executed lighting, looking at these spaces, I said, you guys, I just want you to come in here and see what you've achieved. Like, look at this. Look at what you guys have achieved on this project. And one of the laborers, a guy named Carlos Contreras, said, this is absolutely beautiful. What this means to me is that this is the best fucking company to work for on the planet. And, that project was so hard on everybody. There were times when people were angry, when people wanted to just quit and get off of it. But at the end of it, when it all came together and I'm standing there with a small group of people, even the laborer on the project was emotionally moved by the power of what they had achieved. And man, that is, I think, one of the things that keeps me coming back to this again and again and again, is to see what creating a place that lives by a set of expectations of ourselves and others to produce the highest possible quality, what that can do for people and elevating them towards their best expressions of self is a really motivating thing for me.
Well, that's tremendous. I think the passion is fantastic. It certainly has a major impact on the project.
I think also like taking the time to look at the thing after you finished it, appreciate it before you leave it and move on to the next one is important.
Absolutely.
This was phenomenal. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. There's a whole list of things that we have yet to cover. So the conversation will continue for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love it. Yeah, thank you guys. What a blast. And thanks for answering questions too. I loved hearing your perspectives.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.